The wind howled like a dying coyote across the plains, whipping dust into the eyes of a lone rider tearing through the wilderness. Her dress was ripped at the hem, soaked in river water, and streaked with blood, some of it her own. Mud clung to her face, wind in her hair, but her eyes, they were fixed on the horizon with the kind of ferocity only desperation breeds. A storm brewed behind her. Thunder grumbled low like an omen. Voiceover. When the frontier takes everything, what would you give to save the one thing left? Annabeth Calloway was 19, but grief had chiseled years into her face. The wilderness had taught her survival, but grief taught her silence. She dug her heels into the horse's flanks, urging it faster toward the distant silhouette of Fort Granger, a grim slab of man-made order against the chaos of the wild. Behind its gates, her brother Silas sat in chains, sentenced to hang for stealing a horse. Just a boy, barely 13. But that didn't matter out here. The frontier was raw justice, cruel, indifferent, and it didn't care who you were trying to save. The day her brother was caught, she'd been trading deer hides in Silver Butte, trying to buy cornmeal and lamp oil. When she returned to the homestead, the door hung open. Silas was gone. The neighbor, a cruel bastard named Dunn, had turned him in for the bounty. Their father had died at Antietam. Their mother passed from fever last winter, bones buried shallow, beneath a willow tree because the ground was frozen. Starvation chased them that spring. Silas thought stealing a horse might bring in money, maybe a job in Helena. The townsfolk called them scrap-born, white trash, useless orphans of the war. It didn't matter that Annabeth was sharper than most boys and could shoot straighter too. It didn't matter that Silas was just trying to survive. No one cared, not Captain Strickland. Fort Granger loomed ahead, built of black pine and iron. The gates groaned open. Soldiers stared as she dismounted, her eyes locked forward like a soldier heading into battle. She was not there to beg, but she did beg. Inside the captain's quarters, the air smelled of whiskey and sweat. Strickland sat behind his desk, boots up, his polished saber gleaming beside a half-eaten rabbit stew. "I'm here for Silas Calloway," she said, voice steady, chin high. "He's my brother." Strickland barely looked at her. "Horse thief. Hangings at dawn." "He didn't know better," she said. "He's a boy, just a boy. He knew how to steal, didn't he?" Annabeth's jaw tightened. She could feel her pride rising like bile. But pride wouldn't save Silas. Nothing would. Not unless her eyes dropped. Her voice dropped lower. "You want a whore for the camp?" she asked. "Fine, take me, just let my brother go." Strickland looked up now, smirked, drank slowly. The silence between them dragged out like a blade being drawn. "You volunteering?" he said. Her voice cracked once, then steadied. "Yes." He rose, circled her like a dog sniffing meat. "You any good?" "I've never done it," she said. "But I'll do whatever you ask. Just let Silas go." Strickland gave a slow nod. "Fair trade." He opened the door and shouted, "Bring the boy." Moments later, Silas stumbled in, bruised and pale, eyes wild with confusion. Anna, what's happening?" She couldn't look at him, couldn't explain. Soldiers yanked him out the gate, one last glance back, his lips moved. "Don't. Anna." She swallowed the scream clawing at her throat. They took her instead. Strickland assigned her to the barracks. She was scrubbed, examined, and handed a torn dress like an animal about to be auctioned. But the night never came as she expected. Just after dusk, a shot rang out at the gate. A rider slumped from his horse, crashing onto the dirt. Blood pooled beneath him, his coat riddled with bullet holes, boots worn to threads. He was older, late 40s, maybe 50s. Face like beaten leather, cold eyes that still burned despite the blood loss. Soldiers rushed forward. "Found him wandering near Widow's Gulch," one muttered. "Said he had something important to say." He was barely conscious when they dragged him in, but when they passed Annabeth, standing beside the cookhouse, his eyes locked onto hers. A second passed, then another. He raised a trembling hand and pointed at her. "Her," he rasped. "She's mine." "What the hell does that mean?" a soldier scoffed. The old man's voice dropped to a whisper. My last request. And then he collapsed. Colt McRae didn't die that night. By morning he was breathing ragged but steady, laid out on a cot in a dim corner of the barracks. The bullet had gone clean through his side, narrowly missing anything vital. The soldiers, lacking a doctor, dumped him in Annabeth's care, more amused than concerned. Let the girl clean up the mess. Maybe she'd learn something about death. She cleaned his wounds with bitter herbs and hot water, jaw tight the whole time. She spoke no words to him. Not at first. Another man who wanted something from her. Another weight. Another shadow. But he never touched her, not once. He muttered in his sleep, though. Fevered dreams soaked in sweat and memory. Names she didn't recognize. Eli. Ruth. Then darker things. Didn't mean to leave him. Damn it, I tried. Words cracked like glass. She found the locket tucked inside the lining of his coat while searching for clean cloth. A small thing, worn smooth with age. She popped it open with her fingernail. A boy's face stared back, wide eyes and a toothy grin. No mother in the picture. Just the boy. She didn't know why, but she held that locket for a long time, the image blurring in her vision. She returned it to his coat. Days passed. His color returned. And when he finally opened his eyes, he looked at her not with hunger, but with something like apology. I didn't claim you for flesh, he rasped. Claimed you 'cause you looked like someone who still had a soul. She stared at him, lips parted. Didn't answer. But the hate in her eyes flickered and dimmed. Strickland had grown meaner since her offer. More possessive. She wasn't sure if it was jealousy or pride, but he watched her every move now. When Colt could walk again, he watched too. And he listened, heard whispers through thin barracks walls, plans to break her in. That night, as a storm rolled in, Colt moved. He slit a guard's throat in silence, hand firm despite the tremor. He stole 2 pistols, saddled 3 horses, and met Annabeth behind the mess tent. Silas was there too, pulled from the kitchen where they'd made him clean latrines. Annabeth barely spoke. Just took a rifle, lifted Silas into the saddle, and gunfire burst behind them as they galloped out under the lightning-split sky. Colt rode with her, hunched and bleeding, jaw set in pain. Bullets sliced the air. A few struck near enough to lift dirt at the hooves. Colt swayed in his saddle. She reached out mid-gallop, grabbed his reins, and steadied him. Her fingers bloodied from gripping leather too tight. She didn't yell, didn't cry. She just rode. Behind them, Fort Granger fell into darkness. They headed west, always west, avoiding roads, sleeping under trees. Colt's fever returned. Annabeth fed him crushed leaves and river water. She learned to trap rabbits, skin them with shaking hands. Silas clung to her, eyes too wide, too silent. One night a wolf circled their camp. Annabeth stood with Colt's revolver in both hands, shaking but firm. When the wolf lunged, she fired. It dropped like thunder. She sat back down, shivering, but alive. The next day, Colt started teaching her how to shoot proper, how to track, when to move, how to listen for hooves. You're not afraid of dying, he said, sitting against a tree with blood still seeping through his shirt. That's good, but don't be afraid of living either. She didn't reply, but she started sleeping closer to the fire after that. In the quiet nights, they didn't talk much, but sometimes Colt would stare into the flames and speak anyway. He told her about his son, Eli. Died of fever in a mining camp, back when Colt was still working for the Pinkertons. He'd tried to take down the men building the railroads on stolen land, failed, got blamed, went outlaw, lost everything. Annabeth listened, and for the first time she began to see him as something other than a burden. He gave her his coat when snow came early. She stitched his wound tighter when it reopened. He showed her how to hold a rifle like it was part of her body, not just something to hide behind. On the 6th night, while Silas slept beside the fire and the wind whispered through pines, Colt turned to her. I wanted to die at that fort, he said. Figured it was as good a place as any. But then you walked out, face like stone, and I thought, hell, life still kicks. She looked away, lips tight, eyes burning. "You think I saved you?" she whispered. He gave a half smile. "No. I think maybe you reminded me what saving looked like." She didn't answer, but she didn't turn away. The ghost town rose from the fog like bones in a graveyard. Broken storefronts, shattered glass, and a rusted mine cart that hadn't moved in 20 years. Colt led them in slowly, one hand pressed to his side. The bleeding had started again, but he didn't say a word. Annabeth could see it in the way he sat his horse, stiff and hunched, like every breath hurt. They made camp inside the old general store. Rain began falling through holes in the ceiling. Silas found a dry corner and curled up under Colt's old coat. Annabeth built a small fire in the hearth using wood from broken crates. The smell of old whiskey and mildew lingered in the air. For the first time in weeks, she let herself imagine a home. Not the past, never the homestead again, but something new. A cabin in the hills, a garden, a life that didn't revolve around running or fear. She caught herself smiling, the smallest thing. Then she heard it. The creak of boots outside, a whisper of leather on stone. Colt had heard it too. He pulled her gently down, motioned her to silence. They moved like ghosts to the window and peered into the street. 6 men, maybe more. Dark hats, rifles in hand. One of them wore a captain's coat with the sleeves torn off. Strickland's men, hired guns. "Guess I took too long dying," Colt muttered. Annabeth's heart pounded. She checked her rifle. Only 4 shots left. Colt handed her one of his pistols. His eyes met hers, steady, calm, as if he'd been waiting for this. "I'll draw them to the saloon. You stay with Silas. If they get in, run." "No," she said, "we fight together." Colt smiled. Not proud, just grateful. The first shot rang out like a war drum, echoing through the narrow canyon of old buildings. Colt was already moving, silent as dusk, fast as the wind. He hit the first man with a shot through the eye before the rest even knew they were spotted. Then the street exploded. Rain fell harder. Lightning carved the sky. Annabeth stayed low, firing once, twice. A man fell screaming near the stable. Then one burst into the general store, grabbing Silas. Annabeth didn't think. She pulled the eye. Trigger point blank. The man crumpled. Silas stared at her, mouth open, face pale with terror. She pulled him behind her and whispered, "Stay down." Outside, Colt moved like a ghost. He took a bullet to the leg, stumbled, kept going. Another grazed his shoulder. He shot back, killed 2 more. But one caught him in the stomach. He collapsed behind a trough, bleeding into the mud. Annabeth ran to him as the last of the bandits retreated. Thunder rolled, but no one chased them. They were done. The town was quiet again. Colt's eyes were open, but barely. "You're not what they made you," he whispered, blood on his lips. "You're what you choose." She cradled him, shaking her head. "Don't talk." Too late for that. He smiled faintly, pain etched into every line of his face. "Take it." He reached into his coat and pulled out the locket, pressed it into her hand. "Start again," he said. "Don't carry my ghost." And then his eyes drifted shut. Dawn was gray and cold. They buried him beneath the only standing tree just beyond the mine. Silas helped dig, his hands blistered and raw. Annabeth placed the locket in the dirt beside Colt's chest. She didn't cry. They stood a long time, looking at the mound of earth. Then Annabeth turned west. They didn't head home. There was no home, only the road, the wind, and what lay beyond the next ridge. As they rode into the new day, her voice carried on the wind like a prayer. "He didn't save me. He reminded me I could save myself." If Annabeth's journey moved you, her fight, her sacrifice, her strength, then honor her story, like. Comment and subscribe for more tales of survival and soul on the American frontier. Which part struck your heart the most? We'd love to hear your thoughts below.